Andy, tell me what you're hearing up on Capitol Hill today, and tell me what the worst-case scenario is in terms of what Congress can do to these companies realistically this year.
Well, we're hearing the same old arguments from Congress that we've heard in the past, especially when gasoline prices rise. They're blaming the oil companies on that increase, but the oil companies and the United States is tied to the global oil market, whether we're importing crude oil or gasoline into the East and West Coast, or we're exporting crude oil and refined products off of the Gulf Coast. What they don't realize is, as out there's 145,000 service stations selling gasoline, of which 60,000 of them are by single store operators. In fact, Exxon and Shell this morning said they own 0 retail stations. So when we do see gasoline prices rise or fall, it's really up to the retail service station owner to decide what price they're going to sell to the consumer.
So we all know the game when we watch one of these congressional hearings, right? Every member of Congress is up there. They get a little bit of time. They go for that viral moment. Republicans want to say gas price increases, that's Joe Biden's fault. Democrats want to say, hey, that's the terrible CEOs of the oil companies' fault. Everybody's going to place blame and look for their spin to get on the local news and, more importantly, on social media. So what do the CEOs do as they're sitting there watching all this, the fireworks from the members of Congress? Do they just try to keep their heads down and stay out of the debate? Or do they have any actual new news that they can bring to the table here today to try to minimize the damage?
Well, what they have been doing is actually increasing their capital spending as oil prices have risen. And we saw both Exxon and Chevron announce that they were going to increase production by 25% and 10% respectively in the Permian Basin this year. Pioneer announced that they're increasing their production by about 5%. But like any other industry, the oil industry is beholden to supply chain issues, whether it's for drill pipe, frac sand, or even truck drivers to deliver those supplies to the well site. One thing I will say is the Energy Information Administration has just shown that oil production in the U.S. rose another 100,000 barrels a day this week. So we're well on our way to 12 million barrels a day of production later this year. And in fact, they anticipate that next year oil production in the U.S. will hit an all-time record of nearly 13 million barrels a day.
So the big debate over the past month or so has been whether or not the oil companies are doing enough to drill in their existing leases here inside the United States. The Biden administration said, look, they've got a lot of leases that are unused that are just sitting there and they're not doing enough to drill now. They shouldn't be complaining that they want more access. The oil industry has said, well, hey, wait a second. That's not exactly how this works. It's a little bit more complicated than that. What the Biden administration is saying isn't really fair. Solve that debate for us. Who's right? Who's winning the argument?
Well, they both have a point that the oil companies are sitting on a number of leases on federal land that they've accumulated in years past. But then again, if we remember in 2020 and 2021, oil prices were low, so it made no economic sense to drill on those facilities. When oil prices rise and they have a lot of permits in hand, they can hire the drilling rigs, the drilling crews, and then they can start moving around from lease to lease as those wells are completed and production comes online. Of course, once you bring production online, you also need the infrastructure to connect it to the pipeline grid to get it to refineries. So there are a number of pieces that are required to get the oil out of the ground and to the refineries and turn it into gasoline and diesel for the consumer.
And those economics that you're talking about, they're changing month by month as we look at WTI crude here on the screen, and hour by hour throughout the day. Oil now down below 100. Andy, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.